Welcome back. This video is about enlarged knits before purls, and it's most evident when you're doing ribbing or cables or seed stitch, and we'll talk about each one of these individually. So what you'll see, we'll talk about this swatch first. When people talk about an enlarged knit before purl, it kind of stands out in ribbing. You can see that the first column of knits here is small and the second column is enlarged. Do you see that over here? And it's the column to the left. It's always the column to the left, the column before the purl. If we turn it over, it looks exactly the same on the other side. It's the column to the left, the column before the purl stitches. There is a fix for it, and this is what it looks like after fixing it. The stitches are pretty uniform in size on both sides. They look good. You'll also see this same phenomenon in the knit before the purl on the edge of cables. For example, if you look at this cable, I'm going to get a pointer here. If you look at these stitches in the cable, how small they are, and then how big this one is. Then it gets little, but it's big over here. It's on the left side, then it gets little, big. Same thing over here. So you can see that they're smaller here. This very last column of stitches is really big. If we pull the fabric a little bit laterally, we can also see what I call ladders, which is this big purl column right here. It's way bigger. This one's nice and tight, snugged up against the fabric, but look how this is way out there, and there's these elongated stitches, the bars between the stitches there. And it just makes everything look kind of sloppy. You can see the same thing in seed stitch when you're transitioning from knits to purls. Wherever there's a transition between a knit and a purl, there are these holes, and it makes the seed stitch look sloppy. The fix, when you do the fix, you can change from having these enlarged second column of knits to these nice ones that are the same size. On a cable, the fix looks like this. The outside column is the same size as the rest of the stitches. See how lovely that looks? Looks nice and tidy, and there's no big column of purls in the ditch there. And it really actually gives it a lot more elasticity. It, see here? I'm pulling those about the same. It just looks tidy. When you turn it over, what you see on the lower part here below the green, you see that second column of enlarged knits. Do you see that? How the first column's small, the second one's large. If you move up here, they're about the same size. So if we look here, back here again, and we take a look at these ladders right here, if I take my pointer and stick it in some of those, and we turn it over, guess what? It's that column of purls that's big. And it's the knit on this side. It looks like a knit. So another thing, just while we're here, is an easy way to measure cables. You know, when you're counting rows, not keeping track of rows between cable crossings, but if you're measuring gauge on a cable swatch and you're trying to count these rows to see how many rows you have to the inch or 4 inches, it's much easier if you turn the fabric over and you count the purl bumps in between the two cable columns. And you can also measure this with a ruler much easier than trying to measure this and to see the beginning and the end of this column. Anyway, this video is not about that. That was just a little aside. What we're about is how to make that knit before the purl look better. So first we're going to look at why. What causes that problem? So what I have here is some knit 2, purl 2 ribbing. And I just did the last row in knit 2, purl 2 in a contrasting color because I want you to see what happens when we take the stitches off the needle. If you notice, in Knit 2, Purl 2 ribbing, the stitches flay. They automatically just flay away. They're pushing away from each other. And so there's two stitches here that are the first two purls. Then here's the knit, knit, purl, purl, knit, knit, purl, purl, knit, knit, purl, purl. Now I'm not going to touch this or stretch it in any way, but you can see right now that between this knit and this purl, there's this piece of yarn right there. Do you see that? Now look between this purl and this knit. Nope, there's no gap in there. Same if you look over here between this knit and this purl. Do you see that chunk of yarn right there? And between this purl and this knit, there's no gap. So what's happening there? Let's put it back on the needle and I'll show you exactly why this happens. Okay, so when we are I'm going to be working with the white yarn again. Look what happens between a knit and a purl when we're making the stitch. When we make a knit stitch, we put our needle in the stitch, we wrap the yarn around the needle 360 degrees, and we pull it through. So really, if you took the green yarn off, you would see this white yarn going around and around the needle like that, right? That's what it's doing. It's spiraling around the needle. Now, we have our knit. The yarn is in the back. The next stitch is a purl. So we bring the yarn to the front. We put our needle in here. The yarn's coming from the back, from this stitch. We put it in here. We go all the way around the needle and come back to the front. So that yarn is going more than 360 degrees around the needle. And when you put it over here, you can already see the gap right there, because this purl stitch, that extra yarn, is pushing between those two stitches. And where it'll come is it'll come into this knit stitch and make it big. So when you're going from a purl to a purl, you're starting in the front, you go into the stitch, you go around, and you come back to the front. So it's 360 degrees. Now you're going from a purl, which is in the front, to a knit, which you're going to go into the back. So you're in the front, you're going to make a knit, and you just go to the back. It's not even going around the needle 360 degrees. You can see it's only going like halfway around the needle. Can you see that? Make another knit. We start from the back, go all the way to the back, 360 degrees. We're in the back, we have to come to the front, make our stitch more than 360 degrees. Front to front with a purl, 360 degrees. Purl, we're in the front, we move to the back, go in the front, around here, and it's less than 360 degrees. Can you see that? Where it starts and stops for that stitch. This is 300. Now when we go to the knit to the purl, which is the only place where this happens, is between the knit and the purl. We're in the back, we move to the front, we go around, and it goes more than 360 degrees. That is where that extra yarn comes from, and that's what backs up into the knit stitch and causes the enlarged knit. Now I'm going to do the next row throwing so you can see the same thing throwing. I'm a continental knitter, so throwing is my second choice, not my first, but I'm good at it either way. So we're throwing, and we have the yarn in the front. We're going to put our needle in and go from front to front. Now we're changing from a purl position to a knit position, so we have to put the yarn in the back, and it's in the back. combing around, and it goes from the front to the back instead of all the way around, so we have that short amount of yarn, so it's not going to make an enlarged stitch. This is a normal stitch. Now we bring the yarn to the front. This is where that extra yarn comes from. It's just from bringing it to the front. And we throw and throw. Okay, let me quickly move to the end of the row. Well, I can show it here. So what can we do to fix this problem? There's two fixes. I'm going to show the first one. The first one is the one that I use most of the time, and you do a regular stitch in the first knit. In the second knit, you do a regular stitch. You bring the yarn to the front for that first purl. Now that's where the problem is. So you put your needle into the purl. At that time you pull, and watch this knit stitch. This knit stitch right here. Watch the fiber. Watch the yarn when I pull. Watch it. Do you see it tighten up? You tighten it, then you make the purl, and you keep it tight through the purl. Then you make your next purl with the regular tension. If you keep the tension tight all the way across, it does not solve this problem. Then you do your two knits, normal tension, switch to the back, put your needle into the purl, pull this, you'll feel it slip, you'll feel that last knit stitch slip, keep it tight, make the purl, and then make a second purl with your normal tension. Now I'm going to do it with continental method, and then I'll show you the second method. That method works for me, but I'll show you the second method because I know it doesn't work for everybody. Okay, continental, knit, whoops, we got a split stitch there, knit, bring the yarn forward, put the needle into the purl. Now watch this stitch. Do you see it tighten up? Make the purl, keeping the tension tight, loosen up, make another purl. Knit, bring the yarn forward, tighten, make the purl, loosen up, second purl. Now this is the same thing you do on the edge of the cable. Seed stitch, same thing. You would do knit, purl, knit, purl. After every knit, it's a transition to a purl, so you'd be doing this every time. After every knit stitch, you'd be bringing the yarn firmly forward, tightening it up on that stitch. Also, see, I'm close to the points. If you notice when you watch my videos, I use the points of my needles. It makes a huge difference. Huge difference. I know it's hard to do, but if you practice it, you get used to it, and it becomes second nature, just like anything else. So let me show you the second method, okay? The second method is same thing. You work to that second knit. Now this fix is worked in the second knit stitch, not between the stitches and not in the purl. You put your needle in the knit, you wrap the yarn in the opposite direction, because what does that do? When you take the yarn over the top of the needle this way, it's a shortcut. You don't have a full length of a stitch around the needle, so it makes that knit stitch shorter to begin with, so it will just absorb the extra yarn from moving to the purl. It'll be little, and when it absorbs the extra yarn, then it goes to the normal size, and it looks normal. It won't be enlarged. We'll do it again. You make your knit, second knit, wrap the yarn clockwise around the needle instead of counterclockwise. Then move to the purl. The yarn's already in the front because of what you did. I mean, it's in at the front of the stitch. If you're a continental, if you're a thrower, you're going to have to still move the yarn to the front, or you'll get a yarn over. I'll do this throwing when I do the next row. Whoops, we want to do the opposite. And let me show you what we have to do on the next row, because now all those stitches have reverse stitch mount. Those second knits, you can see them. There's one. See, it's got a reverse stitch mount. It's going to be every 4 stitches. There's one. Reverse. You can see they're pointing the other way. Here's one. 1, 2, 3, 4. Reverse. 1, 2, 3, 4. Reverse. See that? Now, how do we deal with it on the return row? this is what we do. It's going to be this stitch right here, right? It was the second knit that we have the reverse stitch mount. So we're going to knit here. We're going to do a reverse stitch mount here. And now when we come to that purl, do you see that it's on there reverse? So we have to purl it through the back loop, which means bring the yarn forward, come up from the bottom up and purl. Then purl normal. Knit normal. Knit with reverse stitch mount. Bring yarn forward, purl through the back loop, normal purl. Let me do it throwing. Normal knit, reverse stitch mount knit. Bring the yarn forward, purl through the back loop, regular purl. You see that? So now let's look at those swatches again. Whoops, we need to move the yarn to the back. Let's look at those swatches again. Here's the seed stitch swatch. So this is with the excess yarn between the knit and the purl, and this is with it removed. Isn't that beautiful? Look at the difference. Do you see how uniform? Look at that. Even when I pull it apart, it is all uniform. But look down here. See the difference? And look how much this is very sloppy feeling compared to this. This has grip to it. It's not tight. It just feels good. Here's the ribbing one again. Here's the big second column there. Tidy column. You can see the same thing here. This pulls apart, but it doesn't have as much return. This has a lot of return. Do you see that? It's just really cool. I like it. This is the cable. And you can just see how much nicer the cable looks at the top. It's tidier. And same thing, it has a lot of oomph to it versus this one. Do you see that? I'm pulling them the same. I'm not trying to pull your leg. These are just a huge difference in the fabric, and this is what makes your garment look like a master knitter worked it. If you like my videos, be sure to hit the like button, hit the little thumbs up thing, hit the share it on Pinterest, share it on Facebook, share it in any groups you're in, share it with your friends, and subscribe to my channel. See you again. Happy knitting.